Mattel's training in the martial arts. Here's your look at the Mattel Master Universe Origins Ninjor. Modernizing and celebrating the original 80s Master Universe action figures, Master Universe Origins gives you the power to pose Eternia's greatest warriors as retro-style figures, or in the new action-packed battle positions. Let's try to keep this kung fu fighting to a minimal as we get a closer look at Ninjor. Obviously, before we get a closer look at the figure, though, one thing we're going to want to do is figure out how tall the figure stands. It stands the reason that Ninjor is pretty much going to be the exact same height as the other Masters figures, simply just because they're using the exact same molds in all these figures and just changing out a few things, tweaking things here and there to give us brand new releases. Anyways, though, Ninjor, according to the top of his head and according to the tape measure here, is about a 5.9-inch tall figure. We can switch that over to centimeters, revealing that the figure is 15 centimeters exactly. Keeping him company, let's bring in some of the other figures that we've had a look at just recently. Having a look at Hordak. Love that figure. We can also bring in more his boss. Of course, we bring in Skeletor for that. We can also bring in the recently looked at Triclops. Let's bring in Merman. I just love Merman. And we can also bring in Beastman, just because Beastman always feels left out. Gives you a good idea again, and again, I sound like a broken record for saying this, pretty much all these figures are going to be roughly about the same height. Heads will, of course, change, and due to the heads changing, will also increase or decrease the height of the figure. But removing that aspect of it, the bodies are pretty much going to be identical to one another. Ninjor comes included with a longer list of accessories than some of the other employees that all work for Skeletor. Before we get down to looking at those accessories, all three of them, why don't we first have a look at some instructions. Things to tell you before you start manhandling Ninjor are some instructions to tell you that yes, in fact, you can swap out parts, swapsies, with other of the Masters figures. It tells you that the head can be changed, the arms can be changed, the top torso can be popped off, and the same thing can also be said for his monster feet. Other instructions certainly would have been crucial, like, I don't know, how to store the weapons on the back of his torso, but luckily, I'm smart enough to figure that out. He also comes included with a mini comic. Showcased, right in the center spotlight here is Ninjor on the front of the actual mini comic. A good time for him to shine. It looks like he's almost about to trip, though. Careful, Ninjor, careful. And it looks like he's being chased by Stratos and some of the rest of his colleagues. Flipping around on the back so you can see the back of the comic. So far, the progress we have made is we've looked at Hordak and Triclops. Now, we still are going to be looking at Ninjor, obviously, in this review. And we're also going to be looking at Stratos in an upcoming review. For those wanting to see the He-Man and the Skeletor, been there, done that. Let's have a look at the inside of the comic, though. Again, I don't want to sound like a broken record, but the inside contents list no dialogue whatsoever. It's up to you and your imagination, good or bad. Whether you have a good imagination or bad imagination is what I mean by that. To whether you could come up with a pretty interesting enough story. Maybe you can even tell this to your friends. You can open it up and have read along. And maybe your friends could take turns coming up with different dialogue and different scenario for why this story is happening the way it is. Sadly, though, no dialogue. Let's put that to the side. Then he comes included with accessories. Now, I will say that all the accessories that came included with Ninjor are the very same that came included with the original vintage figure. Well, not maybe literally the same, but the same type of accessories. Starting first, when we have a look at this sword, a big, long, curved sword molded here in gray plastic. Now, the funny story about Ninjor is that he was near the later end of the series, and because of that, they wanted to cost save where they could. They basically gave the instructions for this figure to use as little of new parts as possible. So when it certainly came to the accessories that came included with Ninjor, his sword, for example, was already included with Jitsu. So I would imagine, I'm no Sherlock, but I would imagine if we already have ourselves a Ninjor, Jitsu we yet to have gotten, I would think that probably they're going to be using this very same sword for the inclusion of Jitsu's accessories. At least that's my guess. It can fit into his hand. He does benefit, at least this time around, by actually having both gripping hands. Usually you'll see with these Masters figures, they usually have one open hand that kind of has weird-looking fingers sometimes. But in this case, he actually has two gripping hands. So he can actually hold more than just the one accessory. He also comes included with the longbow. Now, the original vintage line, the longbow was, I believe, part of the Eternia playset. Here, though, it's all molded in gray plastic. Actually, the same gray plastic as the sword that he already has in his hands. The last thing he also comes included with is Nunchuck, which I believe was the unique accessory made specifically for Ninjor, at least of the vintage line. This does have a working chain. Although the chain is a different color plastic, my guess is they probably used the handle, painted that differently. Although it does look like it's the same plastic. It doesn't look like it's been painted. It's just a bit strange that the chain is a different color. Now you can either fit all of the things that I just listed into either one of his hands, and you'll have to then lose one of them out. One of them will have to be sitting off in the corner somewhere. Or what you can also do too, is take Ninjor and flip him around to the back. He's got a couple of little compartments for holding his weapons. Now, this compartment seems to be best fitted for the nunchuck, so we'll just fit that down. Just slide it down like that, and then you've got a little storage for that. This area, though, you can either use it for the sword. Let's go ahead and spin it around. The sword will slide into place, like that. Or you can also take the longbow, and you'll see probably in the beginning of this, there was a little clip on the back. It seemed a little out of place, didn't it? Well, actually, you can take the longbow and slide it down, although it helps to tilt the nunchuck just out of the way so it doesn't fight with it. You can slide it in place like that. I think for the purpose of displaying Ninjor in my own personal collection, I probably will end up displaying him with the sword, and then keep all the extra excess accessories housed on the back of his torso. Again, really like the fact they did that. So getting a closer look at Ninjor, like I had said before, near the end of this line, they were pretty much given instructions to produce their figures with the least amount of new molds as possible. What results in that is if you move over Ninjor and bring over Skeletor, they are sharing pretty much all aspects. Same arms, same legs, same monster feet, and same lower underoos. Of course, Skeletor has the different armor. Ninjor has the tunic and the mask. The interesting thing about that, though, is the original vintage line had a removable hood, as well as a tunic that was made of cloth. Both the tunic and the hood were both made of a different material and not used of plastic. So you could actually remove this, revealing Ninjor's real face and identity underneath. Unfortunately, when it comes to the Master Universe Origins version of Ninjor, he doesn't have that. And I almost even think, in a case where we've looked at deluxe figures before, the Battle Armor He-Man, Battle Armor Skeletor, not Battle Armor, but Ram Man, and Clamp Champ were all deluxe figures that came with extra accessories. Don't you think that it would have made more logical sense to release Ninjor as a deluxe figure, where you could have actually had that swappable head sculpt that the original vintage figure had? What results in it, though, is, while Ninjor is a good-looking figure, I think the true purpose of that original figure, the appeal at least, was the fact that you could take off the hood, and you could remove the tunic. You could still remove the tunic, mind you. It has just a little couple of clasps on the side. You just really have to detach that. I do find like the plastic that they're using for his tunic is a little bit denser than Hordak's. Hordak's was a lot easier to remove his torso piece, or at least the part that went over his torso. Ninjor seem to have a bit of a struggle. It seems like the plastic is a little denser. It also makes me worrisome that it could break that clasp on the side of it. But underneath it would basically just be a black body. It would basically just be Skeletor's body or all the other Masters figures' bodies. And of course, like I said, the arms, the legs, and even the monster feet are just carryovers from Skeletor, like the original vintage figure. Despite lacking the gimmick that perhaps made the original Ninjor so charming, Mattel still succeeds with a pretty good updated look to the character. Yes, it would be safe to assume that most of the figures all molded in the black plastic, but there are a few little places that I would have to question it. Like obviously his hands, for example. I can't think that they would have done that in black plastic and then painted it red, so they probably have used red plastic to mold the hands. And the same thing can also be said for the feet, because the feet are separate pieces after all. But the part that also has me questioning it is this area right here, his lower loincloth. I think the flip has happened. Instead of actually using black and painting the red, I think that what they've actually done is made a red loincloth and painted the lower fur in black, because it seems to be a darker color than the rest of the plastic. Let's talk a little bit about the paint, because there is very little of it to be had. Of course, you've got the dragon logo with the sword running through it on the front. That would be the same as the original vintage figure. And of course, there's the paint work now done on his face. This would, of course, originally have been all done in cloth. He would have been able to remove it. But the paint is okay. I do like the head sculpt. at least what you see of his eyes and his eyebrows. His eyebrows are basically conquering everything. But I have to admit, like, the paint is a little on the messy side. It would be probably on a case-per-case basis, but I'm only can really comment on the one that I have in front of me. There is some very visible skin tone paint that's made its way onto the side of his mask. I guess it would be a little bit harder because there's a smaller area to paint, but I wish that that was just a little bit cleaner. Other areas that get, unfortunately, a little bit of paint problems, especially is the top of the gloves. I would imagine these are the tops of his gloves, and they're not just painted on sleeves. But if you would imagine that these are gloves, yes, the paint is a little on the rough side, especially the trim dividing the red to the black. This hand, this arm, isn't as bad, and it seems like the red is a lot brighter coloring. I just kind of wish that this side was just a little bit more cleaner. It actually seems like it even is missing a little bit of an extra coat of paint. Maybe like this side's got a second coat, this side still needs that second coat of paint. But like I said, like all the figures, basically just the molded black plastic. What it more than makes up for, though, is the sculpting. Even the places that normally would have been the fabric on the original vintage line have now been swapped out instead of kind of this patterned material that has been sculpted into the plastic. And that looks really nice. I like that. I also like it as well. He's got that little sash that sticks out from the bottom of his tunic. And that is also a nice touch as well. Now, the original figure would have had this in fabric. Instead, Mattel is sculpting this all in plastic, but the end result is it looks still pretty good on the figure. Okay, so let's have a look at the articulation on Ninjor. Posability-wise, his head moves down, up, back, and forth. And yes, you can rotate the head all the way around as well. As for the arms are a little on the tighter side, but I can still successfully pull off a 90-degree angle bend, at least on this side. This arm's just a little on the tighter side, but have rather tight joints than really loose joints. And some of these figures, unfortunately, have had problems with loose joints. Ninjor, luckily, isn't one of those, at least not yet. The arms rotate all the way around. While you are rotating it, though, actually, this does bring one thing that I want to mention. Because his tunic sticks a little further out on the shoulders, sometimes I've noticed when moving the arm all the way around, not something I would normally do in a collection, but certainly for the purpose of this review, rotating the arm all the way around starts fighting against the top corner of the shoulders, and sometimes as a result of it, you pop the arm right off. Now, going back to those instructions that I sort of ridiculed at the beginning of this review, it's fine, it's good, because all the joints, at least the arms, the head, and the lower waist, what are you doing? What are you doing? Can be detached if you want to customize your very own Master Universe figure. Again, when you pop those back into place, just snap in, and you're good to go. So very kid-friendly, I like that. He does have the bend at the elbow. You can rotate the forearm all the way around, really, if you want to. And the hand rotates also all the way around. Very limited when it comes to the waist. I mean, it's basically just straight swivels, but that's what you would expect by now with the Master's figures. Legs split out. You can bring them forward and back. He has a bend at the knee. Rotate the lower leg. And because his boots, his monster feet, are a separate piece, you can rotate them all independently all the way around. Really like the detailing on those beasts. Look at those beast feet, I suppose. Really, really like those. I like the detailing on the top. But anyways, the feet do hinge back and forth, and you can also rock them back and forth this way as well. Similar to the Skeletor from the original vintage line, like I said, when we bring the Skeletor in, you can pretty much see that Ninjor is just basically a carbon copy of it. The colors aren't the same, granted, but it is pretty much the exact same body. And that doesn't bother me at all, because originally the vintage figure was also the same. Same body as Skeletor, because of course they had to save costs here and there. And they really made up for it then by throwing in some other accessories that weren't with the other figures, like, for example, the Nunchuck. But you got to think again, going back to the idea of the sword. Let's get the sword actually in his hand. Because the sword on the original vintage line was pulled over from Jitsu, I gotta think that Mattel is probably planning at some point a Jitsu figure that not only can use that sword that came included with Ninjor, but then gives him a worthy adversary that Ninjor can fight against in the planet of Eternia. One thing I'd like to ask you, the viewing audience, to draw your peepers towards is the artwork that's featured at the very top of Ninjor's packaging. It doesn't have to specifically be Ninjor, because really all the Master Universe figures have had some really great looking artwork that they've used on the back, specifically centered, of course, around the characters inside the plastic prison. So here on the back of the packaging, you have a leaping Ninjor, what seems to be firing off a few arrows at King Randor. At least Clamp Champ is there to stop him. Speaking of Clamp Champ, something I did mention in this review that I'll reiterate, only one time, I promise, is again, why didn't Ninjor get released as a deluxe figure? Clampchamp got released as a deluxe figure. Ram Man got released as a deluxe figure. I'm not diminishing either one of those characters, but I don't really think that Clampchamp needed to have an extra head. I really don't think that Ram Man needed an extra head. I'm fine with the one that has the visible mouth. I'm never going to display him with the closed mouth plate. So again, why wouldn't they have released Ninjor? Ninjor seems like a logical character to be released as a deluxe figure. Before you, of course, say, well, who would be interested in Ninjor? Who would be interested in Clampchamp? Anyways, Ninjor would have been a prime candidate to release as a deluxe figure because, again, you could have released it with the alternate head portrait. Because after all, the original vintage figure had a removable mask, and this one doesn't have it. So really, the next logical thing would have been to include the figures with an extra head sculpt. And by that, you would have then released him as a deluxe figure and not the standard releases like we're getting right here. Other than the missed opportunity of not including a swappable head, Ninjor excels in a nice-looking sculpted figure. And again, really, it's just basically Skeletor done all in black instead of blue. But a brand new head sculpt, brand new tunic, not to mention he comes with a couple of accessories. He is a nice-looking figure to be putting on display. Is everybody going to be jumping at a chance to get Ninjor? Probably not. Most people are probably going to be jumping to get a Hordak or a Triclops, I think, before Ninjor. I just hope Ninjor doesn't get relegated to being a peg warmer, because he's a nice-looking figure. Just, again, I wish he could have come with a swappable head sculpt. What do you guys think of Ninjor? Let me know down below in the comments section. And if you guys are also new to this channel, enjoying all the content you're seeing, make sure you hit the subscribe button down below, turn the bell notification on. And yes, keep in mind that we are still going to be having a look at Stratos, the last figure from this wave. Until, of course, I have to then go onto eBay and try to find the next wave of figures, because Canada doesn't get anything. Boo-hoo-hoo. Lots of stuff coming your way, guys. So as always, thanks for watching. See you guys next time.